Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Paperny with Compliance Mitigation. I'm super excited to share this case study that covers Dish Network and their conduct that was bad before 2009 and continued through 2020 and cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars, damaging their brand and reputation and costing them customers. For all of you, I encourage you to subscribe to the Compliance Mitigation channel. Our goal is to educate companies on the costs and consequences of government investigations, white-collar crime, if bad decisions have been made, how you can begin to get on the right path and make better decisions. We're going to cover that here in our case study. Right before I filmed this video, I was reading the New York Times and I read this article called "Who's Making All of Those Scam Calls?" And it really ties into this telemarketing fraud. And in this New York Times article, it just gets into the costs and the consequences of people that fall victim to telemarketing fraud and these scam calls. So I was happy to read this. I'll put up a link in the YouTube description to this New York Times article, but it is definitely worth reading. Now, let's transition back to the focal point of this case study as I go through all of my screen share technology here. We're going to talk about Dish Network and the bad choices they made, really, that began in 2009, their telemarketing fraud. The goal of this case study is that you'll get a better understanding of the consequences that follow when companies aggressively pursue growth without adhering, in this case, to the Federal Trade Commission's telemarketing sales rule. As many of you know, Dish Network is a huge company, $1 billion company. And the Federal Trade Commission alleged that they used aggressive sales tactics, including violating the FTC's telemarketing sales rules when it failed to scrub customer phone numbers from the Do Not Call registry. Further, the company hired third-party marketing firms and did very little to confirm that these firms were actually following the FTC's rules and regulations. And that's a theme I'm going to touch on a little bit in this video. It was very easy for them to hire a company, outsource that work without fully questioning exactly what those companies would be doing. That if things went wrong, essentially saying, well, kind of like willfully blind, like I have no idea what they were doing. That's their company. We hired them to do their best. That argument may not necessarily fly, and it certainly didn't fly here. If anything, it made matters worse. And we'll also talk a little bit about post-offense conduct. In other words, if as a company you make some bad compliance choices, well, what do you do once you're notified? Do you learn of it? Do you continue? Do you continue to facilitate the bad conduct, or do you stop it and implement a compliance training program? So if an investigation begins, you can articulate, well, we're beginning to remedy the situation. What a lot of companies do, besides not having the appropriate tone at the top and setting the appropriate culture, if bad things begin to happen, they don't stop it. They continue it, and of course that simply makes matters worse for everyone that's involved. There are some learning objectives for this case study, so allow me to read them. The goal, of course, is to understand and identify what is telemarketing fraud. Understand that the government is not just deterred in pursuing lengthy investigations. Let me say that again, because I think that's a really big deal. The government has our tax dollars, endless resources to investigate. That is their full-time job. So they don't run out of time. They don't run out of money. And it's essential that you understand whether you're a small $1 million company or you are a $1 billion company like Dish Network. If they believe you're doing wrong, they're coming, and it's their job to investigate it full time. So resources mean nothing to them. We want to describe and understand this concept of willful blindness. I touched on that a moment ago when they hired this company and they didn't really know what they were doing and they claimed ignorance. And then, of course, identify the Federal Trade Commission and better understand how the agency interacts with companies and employees. And I think I skipped, forgive me, understand and explain the implications of extensive investigations on a company. You'll learn in this case, brand damaged, hundreds of millions in fines, terrible morale within the company, losing subscribers, just a lot of bad things as a result of not having the appropriate tone at the top or an efficient compliance program. So let's talk about the current state of this company and what was taking place at the time, and a mistake that a lot of employees make within companies. Many people who work in business settings follow what their bosses tell them to do. When I graduated USC and I was a stockbroker, when my sales manager told me to do something, I did it. Some cases, some people don't even have the experience to know that it may be wrong. Some people do, yet they rationalize, my boss told me to do it. I want you to understand that government investigators aren't going to buy into the myth that my boss told me to do it. If you're working there and you're getting paid, they expect you to act lawfully, regardless of what your position may be in the company. So coming back to Dish, if people who were calling and engaging in this telemarketing scam or fraud and violating the Federal Trade Commission's order, they knew that it was wrong, and they continued to do it under the idea, well, my boss told me to do it, and my job was on the line, or my bonus was on the line. And that may make you feel better, and there may be some truth to it that your boss told you to do it, but it doesn't inoculate you from any fallout. And I think it's essential that we understand that. Now, some background to this case study on Dish. The Federal Trade Commission alleges that prior to 2009, Dish Network engaged in high-pressure sales tactics in an effort to get, well, of course, competitors from customers and clients from their competitors. They also retained offshore call centers to contact potential customers. Again, that kind of speaks to eventually a claim that they told government level, we didn't know who you were hiring. We thought they were doing the right thing. We can't be held accountable for what they did. It doesn't go well. It's essentially accept responsibility. Our motto at Compliance Mitigation is we did the time so you don't have to. Everyone on our team has been through the federal prison system, and many of us, including me, went away in part because of the post-offense conduct, decisions that were made after people found out about the bad decisions. So one key theme from this Dish Network case study is what they did when the FTC found out. It's part of the reason the sanctions were so severe. The company's internal culture was driven by a grow-at-all-cost strategy that also famously led to extreme burnout among internal employees. The company even had sleeping and bathing areas for call center employees, encouraging them to work double and even triple shifts. Pressure was driven from the top down at every level. Under that pressure, employees worked excessive overtime in order to meet overly aggressive sales goals. As a result, as you can imagine, attention to compliance suffered greatly during this time. Now, something I'm sure the company had was probably a code of ethics or conduct somewhere. It might have been in a binder that you had to dust off to read, or they may have sponsored golf tournaments and done incredible commercials and held shareholder conferences that spoke to the importance of tone at the top. They were buzzwords, they were cliches. It was said to appease or satisfy shareholders, though in reality, as you were learning in this case study by working on the shower and bathe where they work, the culture certainly trumped the code, whatever they were telling the shareholders. And the FTC was not too thrilled, nor was the United States government, because they brought suit against Dish Network in 2009, claiming that Dish was in violation of the do not call list. And they claimed that Dish was calling repeatedly, not like once, repeatedly calling customers on the do not call list, calling people who said, don't ever call me again. I have no interest in speaking with you. Yet they continue to engage in high pressure sales practices in violation of the telemarketing sales rule. Many of you should know that the National Do Not Call Registry is actually maintained by the Federal Trade Commission. When a customer signs up for the list, businesses are prohibited from making some calls to them. Some organizations, charitable, political contributions are exempt. Well, what did Dish do when they learned of this FTC investigation? And once they began to get sued by, initially it was 4 states, again, to the post-offense conduct, rather than own it and address it and apologize and settle and say, we'll do better, we'll create a compliance program that we actually follow, we'll increase morale within the company rather than having our employees work around the clock and bathe and shower at work and essentially sleep on the floor and then be sleep deprived when they're on the phone, forced to hit quotas. I mean, what a culture. They could have said, we're going to change it and improve. Instead, they doubled down. And they began to defend themselves, essentially by saying that logistically, it would be impossible to check all numbers against this do not call list. It's an unrealistic legal burden, I believe they said. Well, think about that for a moment. Dish was happy to pay their executive millions of dollars, and they were happy to create marketing materials and offer incentives and bonuses to employees who were able to bring over new subscribers, yet they were unwilling to do the work and put practices and protocols in place that actually protects the people they so aggressively tried to bring on board. And you can imagine when the FTC looked at what these executives were making together with what they were actually doing to bring in business, that argument of it being logistically impossible to check all phone numbers, it probably didn't sit well with the Federal Trade Commission, nor should it. It doesn't sit well with me. And then, of course, they also claim, coming back to the willful blindness, they shouldn't be held accountable or responsible for the actions of third-party marketers who, represented themselves as working within the law. And of course, the FTC saw that as nothing but a ploy and a strategy to, remove themselves from having any responsibility while letting the profits continue to come in. Consequences be damned. But if the consequences do come, in time, the attorney generals in 46 states sued Dish. There was an initial settlement of $6 million to settle these allegations with the company and third-party retailers who had engaged in these deceptive and unfair practices. And of course, that settlement also claimed that Dish Network's misleading marketing deemed bad deals to thousands of consumers, consuming financial hardship for one of them. I read in one case that a woman did not know that Dish was taking payments because apparently in the contract buried somewhere, it said they can take automatic payments on a debit or credit card. I mean, most consumers don't read the 100-page, finely printed agreement. In our home, we have, I think it's DirecTV or something. I should know, but I don't. When we signed up, I said, I just want the TV to work. I'm not reading the 100-page agreement, but they buried some language in there that allowed for these auto debits. And in one case, an elderly woman was unable to buy groceries because Dish had debited from her account. Again, doesn't sit well with the Federal Trade Commission, and customers didn't realize they were going to do this, or they had inadvertently given permission, to Dish to make these withdrawals and debits, frankly, for things they didn't approve, like equipment they had already returned, they continued to bill for. So again, rather than accept responsibility, what did Dish do? Well, they make matters worse, and they continued over a sustained period of time, because between 2009 and December 20, where most businesses are growing, look at the technology and growth in this space. It's incredible what's happened in the last decade. Their subscriber base went from 14 million customers in 2009 to less than 12 million in 2019. Yes, there are more competitors, but technology is changed incredibly, yet their business is suffering. Their brand is destroyed. High turnover, not exactly the place you'd like to work when they tell you that you can't go home and you need to shave and shower where you work and then get back on the phone when you're sleep deprived. And if you don't hit your numbers, you're going to be fired. Not exactly the culture. Now, there have been other cultures over the years of companies who have also done this, but they've changed and they've improved it. And that's a huge mistake and takeaway from Dish Network, and allowing this to go on for more than 10 years of not accepting responsibility and trying to fix it. So I'll continue to stress, if bad decisions have been made, own it, fix it, get compliance in place, and learn from people on our team. Again, our motto at Compliance Mitigation is, we did the time so you don't have to. You should learn from this case study. Learn what happens when you have an inappropriate culture at the top, and learn the havoc that it could wreak on both employees who are doing things simply to keep their job, but more importantly, the customers you swear, or you said you're going to serve. In the end, of course, besides the brand damage and everything that accompanies this culture, they end up settling for more than $210 million. That does not include the legal fees. Think about what would have happened had they initiated these changes in 2009. The whole history and future of this company would be different. Instead, they're marred in scandal and bad decision making, in a culture that's toxic, and it will take them years and years to undo decisions that were made over a 10-year period of time. Let's head to the analysis as we wrap up this case study. And again, I encourage everyone watching this to go to Compliance Mitigation to enroll in our Compliance 101 course. Complete it. There are questions at the end that you should go through, that you should own and you should understand. And of course, in going through that course, you're going to get a certificate that shows that you you did the work, you understand it, but most importantly, you need to implement what we're teaching in this video, the appropriate tone at the top of treating your customers fairly, of treating your employees properly, for rewarding them for doing the right thing rather than encouraging them to make bad decisions and acting willfully blind and hiring companies that you claim to have no idea what they're doing. What type of leadership is that? It's not leadership. Let's head to the analysis here as we work our way to the end. I think a lot of people, based on books like Too Big to Fail, presume the government is not going to go after the big companies. So a lot of people would argue, going back to the mortgage crisis from 2008, 9, and 10, that no big CEO went to prison. I think that's why they say too big to fail. Many of those companies were sanctioned heavily. Indeed, if you were to look at the most admired companies in the world, Facebook, Google, Apple, I presume they have ongoing issues with the Federal Trade Commission right now. So don't ever think that these companies are not going to take down because they have lobbyists and the best lawyers that anyone can buy. Size and money does not inoculate someone from becoming the target of a federal investigation, not when people are taken advantage of and scammed, and if the company is not following through on their stated commitments. I really want to stress that enough. It is just not the small $1 to $2 million company. It's the $1 billion companies as well, like Dish. Wrapping up this case study, coming back to this do not call registry, in June 2003, in an effort to combat a growing national nuisance of unwanted telemarketing calls, they created this do not call registry. This registry allowed customers who wished to reduce the amount of telemarketing calls they received to place their number on the list, which is supposedly off limits. And more than 50 million people originally signed up for this in 2003. And I think it's, as we wrote here, it's now over 220 million numbers. And of course, some companies like Dish at the time, who felt they could act with impunity, consequences be damned, did not pay attention to this do not call list, claiming it was logistically impossible to manage. Just keep calling, grinding, bringing customers, and we're going to thrive. As you would expect, a settlement like this and the brand damage that was brought to Dish sent shockwaves throughout the entire company from top to bottom. The whole industry was changed, I think, because of this. Everyone from executives to frontline workers, of course, were scared to death about liability, getting fired, their career. In many cases, I presume they were worried about this becoming criminal. It is not uncommon for the FTC or the FDA or the SEC to launch a civil investigation, and then they're going to refer to the Department of Justice. Go to the FTC website, look at the cases they're pursuing, and look back in 6 months and how many of them have become criminals. So besides these executives at Dish potentially losing their job or getting demoted, they then had to go through what is really the hardest part, the anxiety, wondering, and waiting. Is a criminal prosecution going to come? And our team at Compliance Mitigation, again, we did the time so you don't have to, are experts on white-collar crime. You know what the hardest part is? The wondering and waiting. And it can take years. It's 2021. Our team has some individual clients who have been waiting 6 and 7 years to get sentenced, or 6 or 7 years they learn they're under investigation. Hard to live productively during that time when you feel as if your whole life is on hold. In some cases, it's very difficult to function. So naturally, the consequences for this company, besides the fines, was devastating. What's stunning a little bit about this case was, despite all the lawsuits and settlement, every executive was able to avoid prison. Good lawyering went on, some details, something took place where all of the executives were able to avoid prison. That doesn't happen all of the time. Just go to the FTC website, go to the Department of Justice website. You will see small mom and pop, medium-sized companies who do not have a compliance program in place, who learn that they're in trouble rather than own it and address it and create a system. They seek to cover it up. In this case, executives at Dish Network were very, very fortunate that they did not get charged criminally. There were consequences, of course. As we wrote, the company's CEO was forced to step down in 2011, naturally due to the scandal. And the federal court didn't reach a judgment in that case with him until 2017. The judgment determined that Dish engaged in over 66 million marketing violations and awarded damages of $280 million to the federal government and $112 million to 4 state governments. Again, I'll reiterate that while the company paid a heavy financial toll and their brand was damaged, executives got incredibly lucky that they were not prosecuted. That is not often the case. So often, employees of a company will personally be held liable for their conduct and the conduct of their executives who are making and executing decisions that have caused civil harm or who have defrauded or hurt people. Prosecutors bring these charges every single day. Again, all you have to do is go to the Department of Justice website and you will read indictments and think, wow, have I done that? I know somebody's that's doing that, or that doesn't seem that bad. A compliance program that's actually implemented at the top can not just dissuade a government from moving forward with a criminal prosecution, it makes it a place where people actually want to work, and that you as a leader, you're authentic, and you're following through on the commitments that you make, that the tone at the top actually means something, and the culture is one of rewarding excellence, rewarding people who make the right decisions, even if it may not lead to profits that day. The recommendations, we wrap up this case study, and again, I recommend all of you go to Compliance Mitigation. We have scores of case studies with examples just like this, and quizzes and assessments at the end that you can use to learn and really educate your team, really grow your company in a way that you can be proud of and defend against anyone that seeks to question the way you run your business. A recommendation, a company's corporate culture tends to drive employee conduct. Look at the most revered companies in the world. I mean, I read a study once that some employees place their income like number 6 out of 1 to 10. Number 1 and 2, culture. Do they feel appreciated? Does management follow through on their commitments? Is everyone treated the same way, whether you're the CEO or a low-level employee? That's culture. That's a compliance program that you can be proud of. As you know, many companies begin very small and then they grow and they're not fully positioned. They didn't think of compliance when it's 2 people working 23 hours a day on a shoestring budget. Before you know it, you've grown, you have employees, you have problems, you have staff. Well, you can wing it or continue to wing it, or you can invest the time and create something you can defend and be proud of and really set a culture that will really get you growing. Companies need to continue to critically analyze and document the culture at all times, especially as you grow. A code of conduct shouldn't just be written, it should be embodied every single day. It should be reinforced, and employees should be rewarded for doing the same thing. If you don't follow through on the code of conduct, your company, people are exposed to not just civil issues, but potential criminal liability if they don't follow the rules. Developing internal rules and designating someone in charge of ensuring compliance becomes critical for any company in our estimation with at least 20 employees doing a couple of $1 million a year in revenue. One lawsuit, one investigation can derail everything you've spent your life building. And don't be reactionary. Be proactive. Do it now. Create it now if you truly want to grow. And that's for the reason we're creating this case study, so you can learn from what a billion-dollar company who should have known better, should have done, and they didn't. And as we wrap up here, employees do quickly spot hypocrisy, undermining their determination to follow rules that do not equally apply to everyone. In our experience in compliance mitigation and elsewhere, in traveling the country, in creating these programs and following through, it's always, well, what happens after we leave? What happens after we've created this program? What happens when we're back in our office and you're running this company on a day-to-day basis? Are you implementing everything you said you're going to do? Are you following through on it? That's leadership, and that's an appropriate tone at the top. And lastly, I guess this kind of sounds like a little sales pitch for compliance mitigation. That's okay. We're good at what we do. And again, we serve the time so you don't have to, and we have a lot of authenticity and I think credibility that comes with that, because we've been through it. You have to be very particular with whom you bring onto your team and the training programs that you create. I know when I was a young executive, I had joked that the compliance training I went through could have cured insomnia. It was useless. It was worthless. It wasn't implemented. And it was a problem. That's part of the reason I think there was such turnover when I began building my career after I had graduated at the University of Southern California. Lastly, government agents and prosecutors quickly and easily can determine if a company is acting willfully blind, as what Dish did here by hiring a company and saying, we don't know what they were doing. And this is a great part I love in this case study. I think it's well written. They use 20/20 hindsight, analyzing the facts from the perspective that best proves their case. Conducting and documenting due diligence helps guide them away from that perspective. As all of you know, in this communications industry, it's heavily regulated, and it's only going to get worse or more regulated. Worse for some, good for some. Depends on what side of the aisle you're on. I suppose if you're working and running these companies, it's going to be more expensive, but it's the right thing to do because it protects the people who are giving you money. Telemarketing as well. There's going to continue to be new rules and regulations, and I love this line as well. As government typically uses a sledgehammer approach to cut down on abuse. It is critical for companies to maintain a robust compliance environment, to keep on top of new laws and industry changes and exercise best practices and follow them. If you'd like our team, our company, to help advise and guide you on this compliance environment, processes you need to put in place, we're available. And that's why you should like this video. You should subscribe to this channel. Then go to Compliance Mitigation. Go through our Compliance 101 program and see for yourself. And of course, we're available to speak should you have questions. Thank you for working along this case study with me. Again, I'm Justin Paperny with Compliance Mitigation, and we look forward to providing more value soon with more case studies we will be filming. Be well. Again, subscribe and go to Compliance Mitigation to enroll in our free course right now. Bye-bye.